All right, so the topic for today's debate or today's discussion is one side of the opinion says the COVID is a product of lab testing, and another side of the argument says that COVID is accidental, just like any other viral or any other disease. So, which side would you like to go for, and which side would you like to go against?
I would side with the fact that COVID did originate from a lab. However, it was an accident,
Mhm.
and I believe there's significant evidence for that due to neglection and
All right,
other
start.
factors. So we have to go back to the narrative that the news put out first to put the debate to bed of why actually COVID actually came from a lab. We'll continue to think COVID came from a wet market, which is obviously it's all over the news. It came from the site of Wuhan, China, which geographically is in central China.
Mhm.
And COVID-19 viruses, they come from bats. I think everyone knows that. And those are cave bats, usually only found in southern China. So if there was just like any other of the past five pandemics, the Spanish flu, the Asian flu, SARS, they all came from animal to human transmission. However, in the case of COVID-19, that would have only happened in southern China, not Wuhan, meaning you can actually rule out the case of a wet market theory. And the animals that they were actually mentioning that could carry COVID-19, that was, you can say, infectious to humans, that wasn't even present on the food market since 2012, as it was related to health issues. So we can rule that theory out. Now, regarding the lab, the reason I believe it was accidental was that now we have three centers in the world which test COVID-19 viruses, or you can say virology, which is a study of viruses. You have two in the US, one in Chicago, one in Illinois, and then you have one in Wuhan, China, which is the largest reservatory for frozen coronaviruses, which are tested. Um, Many scientists believe it is a risky procedure, but then it is done uh, just to, you can say, gain experience of how you can beat difficult viruses. So what they were doing was a power gain strategy of making many coronaviruses more infectious or genetically engineering them to make them even more infectious to humans, just so they can, you can say, gain a power advantage to produce more better vaccines. That was the goal. However, unlike the other two that were in the US, which were testing coronaviruses, many scientists did not actually see it as, you can say, an update laboratory that they had. So back in 2017, there were two U.S. officials in the U.S. embassy back in China, who set an investigation in the Wuhan laboratory, which is just a few miles away from the wet market that people are raving about. And they said that it was not up to date. And there were fears that there could be a mishap, which could lead to a deadly breakout due to you can say, because they were messing with genetics. They were genetically engineering them to make them even more fatal than they actually were. Because normal coronavirus could be easily defeated even without a vaccine. However, in this case, when you genetically engineer them to make them more fatal, it could lead to millions of deaths, just like 4 million that died, I think, in total during this pandemic already. So, where was I? Yeah. So they launched an investigation and found out that it was quite unsafe. They did not have proper technicians to look after the freezers that actually stored the coronaviruses. And one leading Chinese scientist and researcher who actually used to head the program along with another gentleman who I'll bring on later on. She was in a conference in Hong Kong when she heard of a breakout in Wuhan. And she immediately, the moment she heard of a breakout, she went on a train back to Wuhan to investigate how this could happen. And she met a reporter on the way, which is quoted on the New York Times website, that the first thing she worried about was that how could there be a coronavirus breakout in Wuhan when actually the bats came from southern China? So the main outbreak should have been in southern China, which is over 5,000 kilometers away. However, there was a breakout in Wuhan, and the first thing she mentioned was like, could it have been the lab? Because she was also very concerned regarding the lab safety. So she launched a statement. However, that's not proper evidence that you can suggest that we have to believe one Chinese researcher, as we need a transparent investigation. And another reason of that is the reason China, I believe, does not want to give us investigation into their lab is because they actually that same scientist lobbied in 2017 and 2018 for more funding to keep the lab in safer conditions and up-to-date technology as the viruses were getting stronger and stronger. So she lobbied for 2 years. However, her, you can say, requests were denied by the Chinese government. And the Chinese government or Communist Party, as it has always been, was really, I think personally, they're really just really shady regarding this aspect that they don't want to be proved wrong. I think it's an ego issue because Biden, the reason the lab, you can say, conspiracy came back was because Biden wanted to launch an investigation using American spies because China was not willing to allow any country to have a transparent investigation like the likes of Australia. They offered a transparent investigation, and then China imposed travel bans and trade bans on, you can say, Australian wine and beef throughout the country. And that obviously took a dip in the Australian economy. And this kind of brutal force really shows shadiness of how the issue is. However, there's still it's still just regarded as conspiracy due to the gentleman which I was talking about earlier. His name is, I think, Zerk. He is an American scientist who was heading the program. His team was getting funded $35 million a year just to investigate viruses. So his whole income, his whole, you can say, life's work was being done in that lab. And he was the same person who was denying from head on out that there was no outbreak in the lab, and that he even headed the investigation that was taken into the lab first in 2020. And it came out just 3 days later that it was denied, that there was actually no outbreak or literally no possibility of it coming out of the lab. And then it's actually true that he is getting funded millions of dollars every year. So his whole life's work is there. And you can't go into investigation with your mind already made up that it's not true. Otherwise, you wouldn't be being paid to do that. So I really think in this way of lack of funding, and obviously this, you can see, fake media outlet and hiring the wrong person to carry out an investigation really led to the accident in the first place.
All right. Based on the evidence that you have collected so far, it's nicely narrated and it's clear. So congratulations on this. At least you have applied something that we have learned. I really want to applaud you for the way that you have transpired, taking the history all the way and then concluding what do you call it? Concluding your first point. Now, your point being is it's an accident, and my point being is I'll quote metaphors. I'm not going to create something which is related to exactly stemming out from the COVID-19 itself. So the first metaphor that I'm going to create is it's economics, demand and supply. Okay. For the last 20 years, before 2020, right, so almost 20 years, the world has witnessed different forms and shapes of war, starting from 2001 all the way to 2021 as well. Okay, so that's approximately a cycle of 20 years that we have experienced. And when war erupts, there are a lot of industries that fuels from it. And those industries, one of them is, they're not one of them, but there are many of them. One is ammunition, one is armor, one is uniform, one is supplies, like, daily food supplies. There are lots of peripheral industries to support the war. If you look at World War I, World War II, and even prior to these wars, on the smaller scale, everybody who is, should I say, who's mastered in their craft supports the war because the money flows out from it. So having said that, if there is no war, there's no funding for the soldiers, there's no funding for the research and development of defense, there's no funding or even less funding, or the question comes, why do you need when everybody is in peace? Okay. So there's no funding in that perspective. But the trend equally, or should I say, the trend is actually opposite. Even in peacetime, there is 80% of the budget given out to the forces, to the arms in any given country. There's no country whose budget is not higher than whose forces budget is not higher. There's no country that is there. Pick up United States, Pakistan, India, every country they allocate the budget more. But the question is why? This is something that we need to look into. And relating it to COVID is now they have enough supplies, enough budget, enough enough peripherals for that industry. 20 years is a good amount of time, 2 decades. So now the industries of that particular setup is already established. They're still fueling from it since the budget is and the fundings are coming in to support this as well. Then the next aspect or the next industry which requires for the next in line or next in queue which requires for to generate the income or to generate the capital and generate the revenue stream is the drugs industry. How drugs industry will not exist when there is no disease. So disease needs to exist. And your point being that laboratories testing new type of viruses is basically the point that where if these viruses are there that has been discovered or even innovated, then there has to be a vaccine that needs to be innovated. And this vaccine needs to be innovated. Somebody needs to take the first mover advantage. That's business. Whoever is going to take the first mover advantage takes the bigger chunk of the pie when it comes to this, eradication of this pandemic or disease or whatever you can call it. Past, this is not controlled. So it's like they just shoot out an arrow in the dark and see where it leads to. And then they go for the aftermath. Although they are very much prepared which direction the arrow is going to lead to, and they're very much prepared what direction and procedures and processes they're going to take to pinpoint where it has gone. So to put it simply, they already knew that these are the steps that they're going to take. These are the mitigation measures that they're going to take once this is spread out. Once this is spread out, and it has unfortunately or fortunately spread out from China, whichever the higher intent might be, it has spread out now. So it took them almost a year to roll out the vaccine, or at least 6 to 9 months to roll out the vaccine. China was the first one who rolled out the vaccine internally, and then they moved out externally. The reason being they're very close is they don't want their news to spread out all over the world, of economic reason as well. Excuse me, because majority of the production of the world is done in China. Majority of it, whether you like it or not. Any industry, anywhere is using Chinese labor to cut their cost and bring up the quality at the same time so that they can have not this chunk of margin of profit, but this chunk of margin of profit. Now, having said that, and relating it back to the COVID-19, I think AstraZeneca was the first one, Pfizer, right? If I'm not wrong. So Pfizer, and there are three more variants or 3 more vaccines that have been rolled out immediately. What are they doing? They're chucking out money, right? Not in the shape, let's say you're saying, you know what, the vaccines are for free right now. That's donation. That's retail business. What do you do on Amazon? I'm doing a little bit of research on Amazon. If I want to be on the top list, the first page, I need to have at least 300 to 400 products to give away. It means without any cost, give it away. So that I get the reviews. Not only I get the reviews, but then those reviews can push me to from page 10 to page 10, page 7, page 8, no, not page 7 to page 6, to page 2, to page 1 as well. And then I still need to give out free, but that does not mean I'm not selling. I'm giving out something free and I'm selling as well at the same time. So once I'm on the page 1, that means I'm on top of the list, then I can sell it to a fair price, if not any price. Make sense? And having this said, your question being that it stems out from a bat which is 5,000 miles away from Wuhan, the province itself, is actually an evidence that what was that virus which was extracted from which is carried by a bat 5,000 miles away doing in a lab. Make sense? Your point.
Well, I won't actually move from, I believe that it was an accident. However, you did mention a very good monopoly in the selling of vaccines. So, you mentioned your point on the prices and how countries buy it. And there's actually the whole narrative of war. It jumps out into many different branches. However, it's still the same human aspect. You're learning to run before you can walk, and you're making those who are poorer, and making the rich richer, which fuels in turn war. In the end, look at what happened to France back in the 17th century. The queen, the king got extremely rich while the community completely poor, and they ended up beheading their own leaders, which is internal war. And that's what's happening right now. Look at the richer countries like the United States. If you read their bills that they actually sent to Pfizer and AstraZeneca for viruses, they ordered hundreds of millions of doses across the country, many of which were wasted. Billions and billions of dollars were sent. And now that you can say, yes, it took time to develop the vaccine, but that monopoly of ordering a massive amount and giving so much money, that meant there's less to go around for the smaller countries, which in turn fuels war. Look at what happened to India. It's not a poor country. However, if you compare the power monopoly between the, you can say, world powers, and India, it's quite a large margin relative to other countries. They had many aspects which were their fault. However, their COVID-19 vaccine dosage shrinked because there was a massive order from other countries and less donation being given to India despite all their finances. So that also led to a lot of war within the country, racial abuse, obviously selling of weapons. It went up 105% during the pandemic breakout, which is one of the worst in the world currently in like COVID-19 record. So yes, a lot of war was fueled by that. War is the biggest industry in the world by a large margin if you have money. So I do agree with your point. There is a slight advantage by boosting economies and to infuriate war. However, I still won't move my point. But you mentioned a very nice, point of evidence regarding the infuriation of war.
All right. So I think I'm going to conclude the decision, the debate itself, that your points are being valid and my points are being valid as well. So they have two school of thoughts for everyone to form their own opinion on top of it. And opinions are very nasty things, to be very honest. Without proper research, it's kind of nasty. Just
However, both, you can say, the spill theory from the wet market or even the lab theory, which has been going on right now ever since Biden launched the investigation, they will both remain conspiracies. None of them will be true unless an answer is found.
You might not know. These are two decoys, and there is something hidden agenda behind it as well. The third point we might not be aware of.
And
this is something
it is,
there is a possibility of that too. Look, what is being seen, we move towards that direction. What is being hidden, we do not even focus on. So raising these 2 points, there is another third which we are not focusing on. And what is it? That's where we need to think on. Since these are two visible points, what is behind the curtain? We don't know.
I agree. Regardless of what the outcome may be, if it's not my opinion or if it's somebody else's opinion, I think the world deserves to know the answer after what it's gone through. And yes, even if China has suffered a lot and they agree they don't want to hold an investigation, China is not the whole world. Even if they are the most populous country, if we combine all our firepower against them, they are nothing. So they should uh, let the truth out, even if it means
The
hurting their own economy, because
idea
like
of
always, they bounce
war
back.
these days is the idea of open war is redundant, and people do not want open war.
I'm
People,
afraid with the money that's in war, I'm pretty sure it's going to happen quite soon.
yeah, obviously, I mean that's there. I mean, in this 10 years, it's going to be the era of the drug dominating industry for the next 10 years. In the next 10 years, you can expect some turmoil and war itself. You can expect it could be in any form or shape. It could be a digital war as well. Might not be the real guns and so on and so forth. Could be a digital war where people are
Okay,
just sitting in their rooms and not disturbing the infrastructure of anything, but then disturbing the actual infrastructure, the digital infrastructure of any country.
makes
Now,
sense.
these proxies have been there going on for a very long time. This has been there since Cold War. So, anyways, so we're going to conclude this, and I'm going to put the unrecord it.